Okay. There we go. I'm going to bring this up here so you can see him. And there's my Simba mask. I had some in here to build it up between the eyes and the cheekbones here. And again, I can make this a little wider right here. And I think I just might add just a little bit right there to make it a little bit wider at the nose part. But overall, we now have the under sculpture part of the Simba mask. And I think she's looking pretty good. So the next part would be to mix your stuff. So if you're doing paper mache, I would say there's some really good things online of the Ultimate Paper Mache website, and you can just search for that, and I'll probably find it and stick it in here later. Has actually a directions to make paper pulp, and that's what I'm using. And it's actually I'm using a commercial product, and I was able to get it on sale. Otherwise, I don't buy it. And this one here is Sculpting mode, which is backwards on here. This is Amico Sculpting mode. But you can also go and here's another one. That's Celu Clay. Okay. So it's Celu Clay, and again, this is spelled backwards because it does things backwards. So that's Celluclay, and this is a paper mache product, so it's pretty lightweight. Mixes with water, and you can make it thin or thick, as thin as thick as you want to do this. So to give you an idea, there's some in right here, and I got a small bucket here, and so it's in here, which isn't bad, and it comes out it does, you gotta watch out for the dust. So I'm gonna do some of that, and you can see, and hopefully it's not going too dirty. And you can measure it out, or you can once you get used to it, usually you can pretty much eyeball it, but if you read it, it says 2 parts Sculpting 1 part water, and that's for a thicker mixture. And if you want it thinner, you add more water to it. And I started out doing it very, very carefully, and oh, rather I want to do this a little bit wider right here. And am I going to be able to get that in there? Is that going to be wide enough? Maybe like that. One piece there, one piece there. I think that'll do it. Give me a second here. Oops, I almost forgot. Sorry. And here we go there. And that's too big. I do that. Now if I do it this way instead, perhaps. And it comes out more like that then. And over. And that should probably do it. Alright. Well, it doesn't have to be, like I said, totally exact because we will be doing this. I'm hoping that this is recording, it's picking things up, or I'm going to have to go back over and do it again or something. I hate redoing this mask. So maybe stuck with something else, but still, this is my last lion mask, so F1 doesn't know the other. That's pretty much where we're going with that. Let's see you. There we go. I'm hoping you're not getting all my humming, sorry. But, alright, that's going to make it a little bit wider. And I'm going to be futzing with this now because it's going to drive me nuts. See, now it's up higher. So there we go. And that should be wider then. And that should work out just fine-ish. I don't like that. I'm sorry, I just don't like it. Let's try it that way. And, oh, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Going from the top down to a wider bottom, that's better. And I can do that. Alright, I got it. By George, I got it. And so if we do it this way, And then I do it this way. And then these can go in like that a little bit more. And now I haven't used this felt stuff with the Cellu clay before, the Cold Sculpting mode, so I'm not sure how well it's going to stick. And it does go, and sometimes it's a little bit problematic with the masking tape, because the masking tape doesn't like being put stuff on. So I'm going to add some water to this now. I'm going to stir it up and show you how to stir it up and get started in some of that, and then go from there. Now, for my first real base coat, see, this here's a pretty thick one here. So for the first base coat, I make it thinner so I don't have to use quite so much, because like I said, buying it is a little bit pricier, but I hit a really good sale, and so I picked it up because I find it so much easier to use to actually sculpt things rather than to paper mache them, because this stuff here is a little bit more sculptable. So I'm going to put that on there. I'm just going to pat it down very carefully. And, well, actually not very carefully, but I'm going to pat it down. So what I'm trying to do is just put a thin coat on here. And you can see some of the masking tape's going to stick through. And when I go back and do my final one, I'll go back and touch up any of that. And this will take 24 hours to 48 hours to 72 hours, depending on the humidity and weather and stuff, to dry. So in that case, it's pretty much like paper mache, but it is thinner. You can see I'm playing around with this, and it's getting it thinner in places. See, and if I go too much, I gotta stop and go somewhere else, because it will be a pain in the keister. And what I do is, again, I put the basic on here, and then I'll come back in and do like the inside the eyes and all the fine detail after this is pretty much dry. And if I come in tomorrow, it might still be just wet enough that if I take a little bit of water, I can smooth it out even more. So I can see that's not wanting to do that, so I'm going to leave that. And any place it doesn't want to stick, what I'm going to do is just leave it sit there and come back and touch it up tomorrow. So it actually is not doing badly on this cotton stuff, so that's sort of nice. And it's keeping it nice and light. You can see it's pretty light. So, and you can see this is a little bit rough. Now the thing about Cellu clay, there's a couple different ways you can do this, and one of it is you can sit there and when it's dry, you can sand it. So you can sand it smoother. You can gesso over it and paint over it, so it's going to smooth that out a little bit too. You can use texturizer stuff on it if you want to. And what I do is a lot of times I'll sit there, because sometimes what it starts doing is when you really start futzing with it, it starts getting a little sticky. Your hands get sticky with it. So I usually have like a cup of clear water. I just stick my hands in the water, and then if I go back over this with water like this, you can see it just sort of makes the top part really, really watery, and you can just smooth it right down. And I use cold water because it is a paper mache product, which means if you use warm or hot water, it's going to set up faster. And sometimes I don't want that to do that. So depending on how fast you're working and what you got to do. And you notice I didn't do this huge, huge bucket full. This is about half of this small bucket is what I use at a time, because otherwise I just don't know. You know, I don't want anything left over, because it's going to get hard, so it won't store. Once it's wet, you want to use it. So you do want to do that. So there you go with that. And then this one here, I'm just working on here. I've been working on trays, and I also work on cans and things to bring it up when I get to the edges. But again, I'll go back, and the edges are one thing I will do later. And you can start seeing now a lot better the underlying sculpture on here, because you can see where this is starting to go in, all the nooks and crannies. And again, I'm just sort of smoothing it and bouncing on it and stuff. My fingers are bouncing, so I'm sort of poking at it, or patting it. Patting it, that's the word for you can use for that. And I want this to come in so you got that nose and the cheek a little bit better refined in there. And that works out pretty good. So this is where we're going with him. Let's do that again. And you can start seeing all the white stuff on him, which is the cellulose clay, and the sculptural quality you're getting off of him. So I'm going to flip him over here so I can access this side better and do the same thing on this side. And again, you can see, you know, in places it goes a little bit better than other places and stuff, and it's just one of those things that you get to play with. I think it took me like 4 or 5 days. Somebody donated this stuff 1 year, and it took me 4 or 5 days to figure out how to actually use it. So again, just mixing it up a little bit with water is good, but then if it starts getting sticky and you want to get thinner and stuff, sticking your hands in water, in cool water, and then going right over it again and getting the extra off your hands so it's not sticking to each other is a good thing. So, and that's how you work with cellulose clay, which is interesting stuff. And sculpt mold and whatever else you want to call this silly stuff. So you can see I'm going to keep, you know, over this, and I'll probably go and fast forward this part too, parts of it and stuff, and go from there. And you can see where my fingers are in there, and I'm going to let that set up a little bit more, because if I overwork it, it's just going to start tearing apart and really show that, see where the, you can see where the, if you go careful, see that's where the masking tape is, and it does not like, it'll stay on it, but you got to be careful with it. See, you got to sort of pat it, because when you move it too hard, it just comes right off. And those are what I'll go back over and fix as well when I get that part. So back around to go with this. And again, this is something else that a lot of people seem to have problems remembering. Alright, this is a 3D object. And even with drawings and paintings and stuff, really, you can turn it. You can turn it to sit there and get there and get your hand in the best possible place so you can work with this thing rather than trying to go around. You can't see what you're doing and you're stretching, and it just doesn't work that way. People go and just stop and think about what you're doing. If it's being really awkward and not working, change. You got two things. First of all, you can just change it like this so you can get over here. Alright, so you can change it. Change the angle you're coming in at and change what you're up to. Or you can just finish up what you're doing, put it away, and come back to it the next day, because sometimes it's just not going to work out for you. There are some days where, you know, everything I touch is not good. And what you want to do is not fight with it and put it away and think about it overnight and come back to it the next day. Or there's times where I've come back to things a week or a month even later. I think the longest I've let something go is 4 months. And I really was struggling with what I was going to do with that. And the option was to redo it, to start over, or cut off part of it. And I ended up actually cutting off part of it, finishing it, and it turned out really well. So, and it was the way to go. I just didn't want to cut off that much canvas and stuff. I thought it was sort of stupid, but it was what it was, and that's what needed to be done so I could get the painting finished and for it to be an acceptable painting. So, you know, now having said that, like I said, it took me 4 months to really say, all right, I will cut this painting apart because it's just not working right. And it just isn't balanced, and I have to take that off. So, oops. Sorry, you can't see that part there, but that I went a little too close for the masking tape. And again, one of the reasons I do this is because, number one, I do want it to be as thin as possible for the base coat. And this way I can come back on and do all the details. And if I missed anything, I can get it the next day. Having said that, and that way I don't use quite as much cellulose clay, but it's also a lot lighter. So it's getting a little bit heavier on this, but it's really, the batting's really worked well, and I'm sort of sad I didn't use that from Mufasa. Mufasa, I did the under thing with aluminum foil because I seen that on the Ultimate Paper Mache and thought it would work really well, and it did, except it still ended up being really heavy when it was done, and I macheted over it. So either it didn't give me enough of the shaping in 3D part, or I went and put the sculpted celluclay on a little too much and too heavy. So these guys are not getting ears. My lioness has got ears, but if you look at the pictures and images and stuff, the guys have lion manes, and the ears hide in the mane or something. So they're in front of the mane, but you don't really see them. And since it's not a disturbing thing, it doesn't disturb you to look at it, and it doesn't occur to you that there's no ears on him, you know, why add it if you don't need to? It's just an extra element that might throw the whole thing off. And since I am using a lot of the Broadway costuming as my inspiration and stuff, and going off of there, I do want it to look great and stuff. So there we go. And I can see, I'm gonna let that go down, sorry. It's getting sticky on the bottom. And I just ran out, so I'm gonna let this sit till tomorrow and see where we're at with it. And again, I'll finish up this stuff and come back in and go back over parts of this and get the rest of this going. But what I have on here, I want it to be flattened and, well, not flattened, but I want it to be sculpted and thin and smooth, pretty smooth, you see, and going from there. And I don't know what I do, but every single time I do it, I end up with one side of the nose bigger than the other. And it looked great, but now it's looking sort of off, which means that I'll have to add a little bit extra clay over on this side to even it out. And it could be because of this. By George, let me see. And there's a little bit too much there, so I can go here with this. And up, 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 up. So that's one of the things I'll look at when I go back in and sculpt it, is I'll look at some of those aspects of it and make sure if I have to add a little bit more sculpting material to one corner than the next, I will. And even it out, which will make it a little bit heavier, but see, you can see it's starting to stick to my fingers. So I'm going to get my hands wet and go back in here and try to smooth it out with a little bit of water and padding and go from there. You can see I'm going that way and this way, and that's looking a lot more even. I think a little bit here tomorrow once this sets up a bit better. And that's another thing, if I have to build up an area, I want it to set a little bit more, because you don't want to sit there and put it on something that's really sort of soft and it's going to smash down on you, because that would not be quite so good. And as it gets a little thicker too, sometimes it's easier to move it around and smooth it out a bit. So we will check this tomorrow and probably finish it up. And you can see it's futzy, but it's not horrible. And you can really, mess around with a lot of it. And overly, now I'm starting to go over, this is what you call, it's time to walk away. So, it's time to walk away. So if I'm going to tell you to do that, I got to show you how to do that too. Which sometimes is easier said than done. Okay, I'm walking away. So tomorrow we'll finish up the rest of this and get him all finished sculpting, and then I can paint on lionesses if we want to.